Domestic violence from a social learning perspective. Albert Bandura's social learning theory emphasizes the importance of observing and modeling the behaviors, attitudes, and emotional reaction to others. Bandura's theory persists that people learn from one another via observation, imitation, and modeling, and is known as the link between behaviorist and cognitive learning theories because it encompasses attention, memory, and motivation. Social learning theory is the most popular explanatory perspective in the marital violence study and is often conceptualized as a cycle of violence when applied to the family. This theory states that people model behavior that they would have been exposed to as children. It is believed that violence is learned through role models provided by the family, directly or indirectly. Bandura 1973 states witnessing violence is reinforced in childhood and continues in adulthood as a coping response to stress or as a method of conflict resolution. It is said that during early childhood and adolescence, observing how parents and significant others behave with each other in intimate relationships provide an initial learning of behavioral alternatives which are appropriate for these relationships. If the family handles stress and frustration with anger and aggression, the child who grows up in that type of environment is of a greater risk for exhibiting those same behaviors witnessed or experienced as an adult. Giles 1972 states that not only does the family expose individuals to violence and techniques of violence, the family teaches approval of the use of violence. Children then learn that violence is acceptable and is an effective method of solving problems or changing the behavior of others within the home. The primary hypothesis for intergenerational cycle of violence is that violent and abusive adults learn their behavior as a result of being the victims or witnessing the aggressive and abusive behavior as children. If children are abused by their parents or another adult, they internalize beliefs and patterns of behavior that lead them to abuse their own children. Likewise, if children observe parents who hit each other, they may develop a greater chance of abusing their own spouses. Transmission of violent behavior occurs through the process of modeling, failure to learn appropriate ways to manage conflict, and reinforcement for violent behavior. Normal coping mechanisms may not be learned or may become impaired, leading to a violent behavior as the ultimate resource.
A mixed method approach, combining both qualitative and quantitative research data, it offers a promising means and advance in the study of domestic violence. Qualitative research is a strategy for systematic collection, organization, and interpretation of phenomena that are difficult to measure quantitatively. So qualitative research can provide the important insights into the subject experiences of domestic violence and a greater understanding of the context and meaning associated with it. While quantitative research is used to quantify the problem by way of generating and explaining phenomena like attitudes, behaviors, and other defined variables collecting numerical data that are analyzed using mathematically based methods, in particular statistics. Quantitative studies can identify mechanisms underlying domestic violence and provide support for theoretically derived hypotheses. However, the use of mixed methods is particularly appropriate for the study of domestic violence because they are two different approaches and can be integrated in different ways that are complementary to each other. Just take a look at the diagram displayed.
Participants for this study, I would first list the characteristics that each participant should meet so as to be a part of the study. These would include victims of domestic violence, their gender, since not only females are victims of domestic violence, sexual orientation, marital status, geographical location, and their employment status. In order to find persons who meet these characteristics, I would seek the assistance of the organizations who provide assistance and support to these victims. For example, in Trinidad, there is Organization for Abused and Battered Individuals. In Jamaica, there is Women's Inc., which comprises of the Crisis Center, Crisis Shelter, and a 24-hour crisis hotline. In Bermuda, there is the Center Against Abuse, which caters to male and female victims of abuse. I would also interview members of the constabulary force and also review their data to see the prevalence of domestic violence cases and how many are female to male versus male to female. After I have selected my participants and I have gotten their agreement to participate in the study, I'll then proceed to collect, analyze, interpret the data collected.
Violence is referred to as a pervasive, life-threatening crime that results from a pattern of controlled behavior. The perpetrator uses violence to control and dominate the other person that causes fear, physical and psychological harm. To generate knowledge and provide data on this social issue, various data collection methods are used to investigate the prevalence of domestic violence in society. Such methods are desk reviews, surveys, and focus group discussions. Data collection is important in any research or study, therefore using both quantitative and qualitative data collection methods can provide useful information on behaviors that influences domestic violence. Data that is gathered has to be recorded accurately to enhance credibility of the study. Firstly, desk reviews would be used in the study to provide existing evidence of domestic violence from the psychoanalytic or behavioral perspective. Qualitative and quantitative research, which consists of surveys, government statistics, and case studies from other countries, would be helpful in gaining useful information. Desk reviews allow data to be gained via visits to government and non-government organizations that particularly take keen interest in alleviating this issue, especially for domestic violence victims. Secondly, surveys would be a data collection method that would be used in the study. This method allows data to be collected from a large number of participants. Ultimately, the study requires participants who are exposed to domestic violence. Therefore, a large sample of a selected population will be used to reflect diversity, thus allowing the sample size be generalized to a larger population. Hence, surveys are a list of questions given to participants and would be administered as a questionnaire that would be completed in a short period of time. Thirdly, focus group discussions would be another important data collection method in the study. The selected participants would be allowed to provide their feelings and opinions of domestic violence to determine complex behaviors. Also, the surveys that are conducted within the study, information gained can be verified and provide clarity based on the findings. Domestic violence is a serious crime, therefore focus group discussions is useful in identifying changes in behavior that is potentially life-threatening. However, participants are allowed to express their thoughts or opinions on the social issue without fear or intimidation to understand the prevalence of domestic violence in society.
In any relationship that is used to gain or maintain power and control over an intimate partner. It so happens that domestic violence can happen to any race, age, sexual orientation, religion, or gender, as well as couples, whether married, living together, or dating. It does not discriminate between the various socioeconomic or education level. Domestic violence can have any form, but mostly physical aggression and assault are of the two which are regularly reported. Victims of domestic violence live under constant fear, threat, and humiliation, which is embedded in the mind due to the atrocious violence. While the effort to respond to domestic violence should be a combined effort between the law enforcement, social services, and healthcare partner, you still find domestic violence being a taboo, and the victims are not involved in disclosing the issue because it is viewed as private family matter. Domestic violence has been on the rise despite the various efforts made by sections of society and government. Nonetheless, positive notion has been brought forth, such as educating women, offering safe shelters, crisis intervention, advocacy, which can help in curbing the rise in domestic violence. While the work is being done to educate people about domestic violence, it is therefore necessary that every strata of society must also contribute to ensure a violence-free life for every woman.